In this chapter, Chapter 11, we will be focusing on language. This is the outline for the chapter, which starts off talking about what language is, and then covers some key terms such as perceiving phonemes, words, and letters. Then it goes on to talking about understanding words, and as you can see, this is the area that is highlighted, and so this is the area of this chapter that I will focus on in this lecture. But the chapter also talks about how we understand sentences, how we understand text and stories, how we produce language, and then finally a discussion about culture, language, and cognition. So let's get started talking first all about what is language. Language is defined as a system of communication that uses sounds or symbols. Language enables us to express feelings, thoughts, ideas, and experiences. How do we use language to help us to understand words? And that was what we will focus mostly on in this lecture, is how do we understand words? First of all, some terms. Cognitive psychologists talk about a lexicon, and these are all of the words that a person understands. It turns out that we understand, each of us, about 50,000 words. It's also important to understand phonemes, and phonemes are the shortest segments of speech that, if changed, changes the meaning of the word. For example, B, I, and T are phonemes of the word bit. We can change the meaning of that word by changing the B to a T, in which case we have the word pit. Morphemes, on the other hand, are the smallest units of language that have meaning or grammatical function. For example, the word truck has one morpheme because it has the smallest unit of meaning. But think about the word bedroom. Bedroom has two syllables, bed and room, but in this case it also has two morphemes because each of these syllables in and of themselves, bed and room, have meaning. So how does meaning influence our perception of sounds? Think about an effect known as the phonemic restoration effect. This is when we fill in missing phonemes, which again, remember, are the shortest segment of speech that, if changed, could change the meaning of the word. We fill in missing phonemes based on the context of the sentence and the portion of the word that is used. So imagine this task right here, in which a person hears the sentence, met with their respective legislators, and there was somebody that coughed right when this S occurred. What does this person hear? The person hears this S. Actually, the person doesn't hear this S because the cough prevented this person from doing so, but they fill it in. And so basically their mind hears that S, and so what they hear is met with their respective legislators. Similarly, think about spoken sentences. We understand a sentence, a spoken sentence, even though there are no spaces between the words. This is known as speech segmentation, which is our ability to perceive individual words even though there are no pauses between them. Speech segmentation is aided by a number of factors, including, as we just saw, context, understanding of meaning, understanding of sound and syntactic rules, and statistical learning. So we've seen that context helps us perceive sounds in spoken language. It turns out that it also plays a role in how we perceive written letters. Think about the word superiority effect. And this is the finding that letters are easier to recognize when they are contained in a word than when they appear alone or are contained in a non-word. Think about uh, this study right here. And in this case, when people were asked to choose which two letters they had seen in the original stimulus, they were quicker and more accurate when that letter had been part of a word. So this helps us to explain how context really does make a difference. So what are the factors that influence how we understand the meaning of words? So let's talk a little bit about understanding words. Cognitive psychologists use something called a lexical decision task. In this task, participants are asked to read a list of words and non-words silently. And then they are asked to say yes when they come upon an actual word, but not say yes when they have come upon a word that they think is not a word. It turns out that people respond more rapidly to high frequency words, words that we see all the time in the English language. This is known as the word frequency effect. It turns out that people also spend a longer time looking at low frequency words, and this involves our eye movements while we are reading. So words that occur with different frequencies affect our ability to access their meaning. Some words have more than one meaning. And you might wonder, well, how does this affect our ability to access the correct meaning of that word? This is called lexical ambiguity. This occurs when we have words that have more than one meaning. Think about the word bug, which can be both a noun and a verb. Think about the word bank, which can also be a verb and a noun. How do we know which meaning is being referred to? Well, once again, context. Context clears up ambiguity after all of the meaning of the words have been briefly accessed. And so if you hear the word bat, you very briefly, right, and we do this cognitively, we very briefly think about all of the various meanings of that word, and then we pay attention to context to help us to figure out which meaning is being referred to in this case. Some other terms: meaning dominance. The fact that the meaning of some words are used more frequently than others. There are two kinds of meaning dominance. One is called bias dominance, and this is when words have two or more meanings with different dominance. So the word bat, for example, when we think about bat, we might typically think about the baseball bat versus the animal bat. Other words have more balanced dominance, and this is when words have two or more meanings with about the same dominance. Of course, the difference between biased and balanced dominance influences the way people access the meaning of words. For example, think about this task. In this task, participants were asked to access the meaning of ambiguous words while reading a sentence. And that sentence is determined by the word's dominance and the context that was created by that sentence. And so in this first case right here, when there is no prior context, and remember we've stressed the importance of context. When there is no prior context, speed is determined by the word's dominance. When there is prior context, speed is determined by dominance and by context. These results suggest that how we access the meaning of a word is complicated and is influenced by many of the multiple factors that we've already talked about.